Would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them.
Hello and welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric, from the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all. Join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter, and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. If you enjoy the show and find it of value, consider supporting and becoming a patron via the Patreon at patreon.com/philosophicalminds. A small contribution makes a big difference and definitely makes it easier for me to continue the show, although I will always do my best to keep it flowing regardless. Thank you all, and let's get into it. All right, I am joined this evening with AJ Olsen out of Australia. He's somewhat of a water ionizer, a creator of restructured water generation. Maybe for me, as well as the listeners, maybe go ahead and give us a little bit more context about yourself and your background.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you for your time, Annie, and just inviting me onto the show as well. So a little bit about myself. So yeah, based in Sunshine Coast here in Queensland, Australia. So I'm a water ionizer distributor that specializes in using electrolyzed reduced water from the ionizers within businesses and farming and just health conscious individuals in general. And so then that's where like restructured water generation, the business came from. And yeah, a little bit about myself is I've spent a bit of time in the regenerative farming space here in Australia, and that's sort of been my passion project and sort of something that's been happening in the background of the last couple of years. And then that's where it led me into the whole water journey and using electrolyzed reduced water instead of chemicals in the farming space. And yeah, just like I'm young as well, so I'm 23, so a little young gun.
Head of the game.
And yeah, that's it, getting in early, just so because I know that I've got a long road ahead and it's going to be, yeah, it's exciting. But age is just a number, and for me especially, like proving that point is like you can do so much in such a small amount of time, no matter how old you are. And for myself, and having started and had a few businesses already at such a young age, it's so good to be able to share that with people and go for any other young people that are listening or watching this. It's like you can do whatever you put your mind to, no matter what. And it's just like that's why I'm sort of stepping into moving my company, moving my business into bigger and places that I can't even comprehend for myself. And it's just there's so much that you can do. And for me, restructured water regeneration is that vessel that's going to take me to those places, and having these conversations as well. It's, sharing this information with people is what matters the most, and getting that word out, because, to have a project that, you want people to know about, well, using your voice and sharing that information and talking about it is such a great vessel. So yeah, I'm really grateful for your time, brother. And yeah, it's going to be such a good chat. I can already feel it.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's super motivating and encouraging for people that are listening because you're living by example, and it's great that you are doing podcasts like these and getting the word out there and spreading the message. And you just have such good positive energy every time I talk with you. You're like really good vibes all around. So yeah, you're doing important things. Just for the listeners too, if people aren't going to be watching this on video, he's actually in a beautiful scenery right now in actual nature doing this. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about some of this terminology for people that may not be familiar. Maybe we could just start with ionization. Like, what is ionization?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot of like words that people that go right over people's heads, and it's good to I get this question a lot, and it's good. But I think in simple terms like layman's terms for people who don't know and who haven't got like a bit of a scientific mind, ionization is really just a process that we use where we have water pass through we call it an electrolysis chamber. So the water passes through 8 titanium platinum dip plates in our ionizers in our home ones, so just at home. And then what happens is the water goes through the chambers, and then the minerals that are present in the water get split up and split into oxygen and hydrogen gas. So it's the electric charge that's running through those metal plates that basically separates the minerals into a acidic, so negative, or positive chamber, or a alkaline or alkalized negative chamber. So essentially, you're splitting up the water into 2 streams, creating oxygen and hydrogen gas through the ionization process. And what you're achieving through that is basically this molecular hydrogen-rich drinking water that me, myself, and then people that have these machines drink every single day.
Wow. And then so with this process that you're speaking of, are you when you're splitting it between the negative ion portion and the positive ion portion, is it that you're keeping the alkaline or the negative portion and then getting rid of the positive, or is that the idea?
Yeah, so the idea is that you collect the alkalized water. So, I drink 9.5 every single day out of the machines. And, that's got the most molecular hydrogen. So I'm drinking that every single day. And then the acidic hose, some people call it the waste hose, is that you can actually collect that and then use that for a whole range of different things. If you're on property or if you're on town water, so tap water, you can collect that and just water your indoor plants with it. There's so many uses.
Yeah.
But essentially you have 2 hoses, so you can collect both and you utilize both.
Cool. So, okay, so when it comes to things like for me, I'm a pretty big spring water drinker. It's my main water
Yeah.
source. I'm curious, do you drink spring water just as it is, or does it depend on the spring? Do you sometimes ionize your spring water as well, or what's your protocol like with that?
Mm. If I had access to a spring in my area, like I would be drinking the spring water but through the machine, because when you put it through the machine, for example, like it just brings back that microclustering and a little bit of that structure and that life that you're looking for. So say if you go to a spring and it's like a spring that's actually just flowing over, river stones, and it's vortexing and it's got structure, and you collect it and then you hold it up and it'll have bubbles, and they call it like cloudy water. And that's that oxygen gas. But beyond that, what you can't see is the hydrogen gas. And there's not every spring has it, but a lot of them do. And what that is the antioxidants. And so if you go to Italy, or Okinawa in Japan, or there's one in Germany and there's one in Mexico, there's these certain springs that are these medical grade springs, and they're full of this molecular hydrogen, and it's this high powered antioxidant with a high negative oxidation potential, so oxidation reduction potential, which is slowing down that oxidizing sort of stress response in our bodies. That's what we're looking for. So for me, I used to drink spring water. I used to go and collect spring water on a property that I was working on in my area, and I can still go and collect that spring water, but it's easier for me to just have the water go from the manifold water, so the mains water, through the machine. There's an internal filter in the machine as well, so that filters out 99% of the chlorine, sediment, rust, odor. And if you're concerned about fluoride, then that's when you get a pre-filter or something like that to get your reduction on other heavy metals and fluoride and stuff like that. But it all starts with testing your water source first. So in my opinion, for people that don't have access to these machines, spring water is, from a living spring water source that you can go and either collect yourself or buy from someone in your area. That is one of your best options, or an artesian well. But of course, now we have issues with contamination, and we just have to be sure that it's not contaminated with any chemical, like farm residues, or any other residues that might be running into the spring, because that is an issue now. I think I've been hearing from different areas, especially over in the States, in some areas now, with some of the, the chemical, the leaks that have been happening. I'm just like, I'm really concerned. Hey, it's a lot of people's water sources are so contaminated over there now.
Absolutely. So I think some people may be fond of spring water for the mineral content in particular. I'm curious, with the ionization, I would assume maybe you do lose some minerals that maybe you'd want. I'm curious, would you yourself want any minerals in that, or maybe do you add sea salt, or what is it? What are your thoughts on all that, like in terms of getting trace minerals and stuff from water?
Yeah. Well, what's good about the machines we use is that when you put it through the filters, they don't actually pull out the minerals that you want. So calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and there's some trace minerals in there as well on small amounts that are actually good. Like some manifold water I've seen have very, very small amounts of silver in the water, which is actually good on some levels if it's on small doses.
Real quick, what is manifold water?
Mains water or tap water.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. So just like if you're in the city or in the town, like I think in the States, like I've just heard that manifold water, like that word used a lot.
Okay.
So I'm trying to use a bit of like Australian lingo and then like
I should
American
know that
lingo.
one.
Yeah. Yeah, because here we just call it tap water. So and then I've just heard some American crew over there, like the people I talk to, they're like, yeah, our manifold water. I'm like, what's manifold?
Interesting.
And then they're like, oh, it's our tap water. I was like, oh, okay.
So you're saying it has a little bit of silver sometimes?
Yeah, so some, like on some levels I've seen, especially with our water here, I've seen very small amounts of silver in the water, which can be positive for our bodies because silver is very antibacterial, and it's really great. So if you think of colloidal silver, you know how people take colloidal silver, it's kind of like that. So a little bit of silver on very small amounts is okay, like similar to colloidal silver. But what's important is, the magnesium, the potassium, the calcium, the sodium in the water. And when the water goes through the filter, it doesn't take out those minerals, which is good. It leaves those minerals present because for electrolysis or ionization to work, you need the minerals in the water. And those minerals in the water is what creates the oxygen and hydrogen gas. So, for example, a good way I explain this is when we produce the 2.5 and 11.5 from the machine, because we can change the pH of the water through ionization. So when we produce the two strong acidic and strong alkalized water through the machine, what we do and how that's done is by adding a little bit of sodium to the water. And that little bit of extra sodium is enough to create the high pH and the low pH in the water, because it's very, very, very acidic and very, very alkaline water.
In your opinion and your research and understanding, is there such thing as too much alkaline water? Do you want to have some form of acidity every now and then, or do you get that in other ways? Or because I've heard the argument, like a good argument, that a lot of people are like only alkaline, but then I've also heard the argument that there are some forms of a little bit more acidic water that are good. So I've always been kind of interested. I wonder from your perspective about that.
Yeah, definitely. So in my opinion, and from what I've researched around this topic, through drinking ionized water, especially 9.5, and I've been drinking it for the last year and about 5 months. 9.5 every single day. And I've never been healthier. Like, and my health is always just getting better and better. And the changes I've felt in my body, that's the testimony I actually have on the water. It's pretty mind blowing. But just regarding, over alkalizing your body, like, so how I explain this to people that ask me this question is, there's nothing wrong with drinking too much alkalized water, but if you go out and buy bottled water that's made with a chemical and then they've just labeled it as alkaline, that's a different water source. Because
Okay.
all they might have done is taken reverse osmosis water or some sort of other water that maybe just straight filtered water and then put a chemical in there to increase the alkalinity of the water. And that's how most, if you go to a health food shop or any shop that sells alkaline water in plastic water bottles, then, you're getting, most of the time, you're getting a water that's basically been altered with a chemical.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
And
that's probably a really important distinction. I'm glad that you brought that up. Is there
yeah,
any way for people to tell by looking at any information on the labels or?
if it's got an ingredient list, I just say stay away from it.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
yeah,
point.
yeah. If water's got an ingredient list and it's in a plastic bottle, I would say stay away from it, even if it says it's BPA free. There's a lot of issues now with microplastics leaching into the water, other chemicals from the plastic also making that water more acidic. So I've gotten bottled alkaline water and then I've tested it and they've said it's around a 9, but because it's been sitting there for maybe about a year, it's actually shown up more around an acidic, so 6.5. Because
Wow.
what happens with any water that you bottle over time, well, not only is that you lose the structure of the water, which is important, and that's structuring water, and structured water is a different realm in itself, but it also comes into ionization in small ways through microclustering, which is, people talk about that, and if you know about microclustering, it's the hexagonal shape that water starts to take when it goes through ionization. To get true structured water. So if people know about, have you heard of Michael Pollock?
Michael Pollock. I
Yeah,
don't think so.
yeah. Michael Pollock. He has the Pollock Pollock Labs over there where you guys are, not in your area, but over in the States. And he basically created this lab. There's another name for it. I can't remember what it's called, but he created this certification for structured water devices. And basically, he's been one of the sort of like key icons in structured water and what people call the fourth phase of water. And to achieve that, you need to use structured water devices or vortexing water devices. So what I've started to play with, which has been really cool within the farming space, is using vortex water devices on the exit point of our ionizers.
Okay.
And that's been really cool.
Yeah, just I don't know if this is related. I have actually interviewed Jared Polak. He's a dude that talks about the structured fourth phase of water and all that. But
Oh, hang on.
is
Yeah,
that
no,
a
it is
different?
Gerald Collins.
Okay,
No, it's the
cool.
same guy. I just
Yeah,
got
yeah.
the
That
name.
guy's
I was thinking of someone else. Yeah.
yeah, he's amazing though. That guy's brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
I talked to him. It was actually one of my earlier episodes, so it's not super fresh in my head, but I remember it being so fascinating.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Gerald Pollock. That's right.
Gerald
That's
Pollock.
right.
Yep, that's him.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry for the confusion. I was thinking of, I don't know where Michael come from, but
Yeah,
I think I believe,
when you said Pollock, I was like, okay, I think I know who he's talking about.
yeah, yeah, Gerald Pollock. Yeah, you got
Anyway,
it. So you
sorry.
had him on the podcast.
Yeah, yeah. Didn't mean to cut you off there, but I just wanted to put that in
I
there.
know. No,
So,
that's good because sometimes my brain, I just go, hang on, who am I talking about again?
definitely.
Yeah,
Well, okay, you mentioned,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
first, did you want to finish up your thought before I ask you this next question?
Mm. No, you're far away. I think that was really what I wanted to say. It's just, yeah, when it comes to structured water and things like that. It is a whole, I suppose, another realm of conversation and a topic to go into. And I'm so happy to talk on that because it's quite
Absolutely.
interesting when you start to play with ionization and then vortex water or structured water, and then and watching how minerals and absorption and all the things start to change. Like it starts to get a little bit in depth and sort of go, I can watch it just go over people's heads,
Yeah.
in one ear and then out the other ear. But
Well,
and that's why I don't.
I definitely do want to go into it,
Yeah.
but I want to ask you first because you mentioned a little bit ago filtration, and I should have
Mm,
waited until I talked to you. I actually just literally ordered a shower filter today, because I'm gonna
oh,
be
yeah, yeah.
moving soon, so I want to have like a cool filter. And I basically just bought like the best seller one or whatever that was on Amazon. It was
Mm,
like a Brita or something. I don't know if that's good or if
yeah.
it's I'm curious, like, what about for things like showers and your skin and all of that? What would you recommend for any type of like shower filtration? Do you have anything in that regard, or do you focus more on the other stuff? Or
Mm, definitely. Well, so um, for we haven't actually spoken about it. So are you? Do you know the company that I sell machines with, like Enagic? Have you heard of Enagic
no, I
before?
haven't. Mm-mm.
Okay, so I'll just touch on that. So the ionizers we use, so within restructured water generation in my business, they come from a company over in Japan in Okinawa.
Oh.
So for anyone listening, some people might have heard of it before. I can probably hear some skepticism already happening in some people's brains, but a lot of people know the water as Kangen water. So a lot of people know it as that.
Mm.
um, and and I understand where that sort of skepticism comes from. And I get faced with this, nearly every day within my business. But it's great when I start to talk about it because it starts to break down, um, you know, the paradigms between, what they see on the internet and then someone like myself who's using it for a whole range of different things within, agriculture and farming. Now, Anagic, so they've been around for about 50 years. They started to make, initially when they first started, they're making medical grade hospital equipment for the hospitals in Okinawa. And what was great about that is because they were working with the hospitals, and then they came up with, through some research they were doing, they come up with the idea to make these ionizers, and they were using them within the hospitals over there. And then they decided to get them out to the public. So they're like, how do we do that? And then they did come up with a whole selling system through network marketing and direct sales. And then I've just utilized their business model within what they do and then taken it and done my own thing. Now, because of that, they've also got, a shower filter, and they've also got, Ukon turmeric supplements, which they grow and over in Okinawa as well. But why I'm mentioning this is because when it comes to, I suppose, just whole house filtration or shower filtration, just your drinking water filtration, everybody sort of has a bit of an opinion and an input.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like to look at, because obviously some people just can't afford, you know, big chunks of money on whole house filters, so they look for the next best thing. And so the ionizers, we use, they're in-house ones. They just sit on your bench. They're great to have. You just hook them up. It's very simple. The shower filter is the same sort of concept. You just go in, you hook it up to your shower, and you've got like a kind of like a hot spring. Um, sort of, have you heard of the onsen spas in Japan?
Nope. Haven't.
So they're like these beautiful, like, um, hot spring mineral spas over in
Oh,
Japan,
nice.
and
My
they're
sister.
like they capitalize them on over there,
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
and they're great. You go and pay some money, and you go sit in these hot springs, and they're full of minerals, and your body just feels so good when you go and sit in these springs. So they basically replicated that, put that into a shower filter. So if you go, the Brita shower filter that you've ordered, you know, what I say to people that buy something like that to start with, there's nothing wrong with it. You haven't purchased like the wrong item, but because it's probably got like the ability to filter out like chlorine, correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, chlorine, and a couple other things probably as well. And that's the perfect place to start if you don't know any information about what to get. And that's where I see most people start if they're curious about this world and this realm, and they've heard, oh, get a shower filter. It's great for you. It's better for you because your skin is the largest organ in your body,
Definitely.
and you do absorb quite a lot of chemicals and chlorine and things through our skin, because especially if you're having a hot shower.
Which I do.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so how do you spell that? The name that you mentioned of that brand?
Okay, so the company is called Anagic. That's the company that makes the products that
Mm-hmm.
I use within my business, and get people onto. So it's ENAGIC,
Okay,
Anagic.
cool.
Kind of like
Awesome.
magic, but it's Magic.
Yeah, I was curious. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that. Awesome.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so then that's good to know. And then that way, if I ever want to step up my game, that's where I can go.
yeah. That's it. And at the end of the day, like you can roll with your British shower filter for X amount of time, but you might go, okay, cool. I might want to look at a whole house filter system, or something that's going to be like a spa, because sometimes you just want to be like living your best life. You got like
Yes.
this epic shower filter in your shower, and you're just like, you can have a hot shower and not worry about it, and it just
Yeah,
feels good.
definitely.
But that for people, I find, some people aren't so concerned with it. Some people don't even, they're on rainwater, for example.
Oh.
So, they're on rainwater, or, they might be on spring water, or bore water, which is your equivalent of like well water.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I
You
want to
know,
ask you about so say somebody is on rainwater. I'm curious because I don't exactly know how, we've got so many planes these days and different like air
yeah,
pollution, and I would assume that some of that may be potentially getting into the rain. So
yeah,
you'd probably want to filter that as well, huh?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I think it's like the start of 2020, I think it was the start of 2020, there was like a thing that went out worldwide. And it was like a notification to basically everybody saying that all rainwater was is now considered toxic
Oh,
worldwide.
that is so sad.
It's like, yeah,
God.
and I knew it was already like the case, but when that went out, it was just like a double confirmation, because I had so many people prior to that coming to me and going, rainwater's fine, right? And I was like, well, give me a sample and I can test it
Yeah.
and I'll see. And every time I tested it, like I was getting here on the coast where I am, I was getting rainwater samples showing up at a pH of anywhere between 4 to 6
Oh, wow.
on the acidic scale.
Dang.
But then what's the scary part is you've got trace elements of things like boron, which is like a really nasty.
It's like
Um,
barium and
okay?
strontium or something too. I think I've heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And it's like these things that are coming from the cloud seeding that's happening, and some of the
Yeah.
geoengineering that's happening. And if you live near an airport, I looked at a few studies not too long ago showing just if you were near an airport and you were growing, it was food related, but it would still translate to water,
Yeah.
probably just on a bit of a different level. But the jet fuel remnants and the residues in the food that they were growing was being found in the soil and the plants at levels that were, they shouldn't be at that level. But because they're right next to an airport, obviously they're going to be like at a
Oh,
higher risk.
man.
So if you're directly over a flight path or anywhere in vicinity of an airport, well, then you've got an issue with even jet fuel residue running
Yeah.
into your rainwater. So
Wow.
it's very important to even filter rainwater on some level before you drink that as well. And I mean, you can do that very simply with just a very simple two-stage filter these days,
Yeah.
and a UV filter for any bacteria or something like that. So it really just depends on your area, and it's good to always just check and get it tested and just see what's actually going on.
Yeah. So, okay. So kind of back to like negative oxidization potential and why that's
Mhm.
important for health. Like aside from the fact that it's filtering out the stuff you don't want, maybe we could talk a little bit about why and maybe some biologically related things with negative oxidization potential and kind of how that helps facilitate good health within people.
Mm-mm. So if you, in terms of just like having access to that water, is that what you mean in terms of like having like
Well,
getting some of the health benefits?
I would assume that it has something to do with the way it's helping regulate your biological processes more efficiently with the negative, like as I've heard things about like negative ions,
Mm,
um, and how they can
yeah.
like kind of increase
But
health in your body in certain ways and whatnot.
yeah. So you're just talking within our bodies more so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's a it's such a fascinating, like, for me, I get so excited when I get these questions because there is so much to it, but it's so fascinating because people don't realize like actually how much there is to water and water science. And it's the stuff that I love. When I get these questions, I'm just like, yes, like, people want to actually hear this, and it's so good because this stuff, it's not real, it's known, but it's not really out there for the public to actually see. And this is why it's important to have these conversations and share this information, because when people start to get exposed to it, that's a seed for them to then go out and do some research of their own. And, if you're going to go out and do some research, look at some peer reviewed scientific papers, and don't just read the abstract.
Yes.
If you can understand something like that, go in and actually, if you've got a friend who's maybe done a doctorate, help them, get them to help you understand it, because they're going to be able to read a paper and tell you, okay, no, don't look at that because it's being funded by this company to get this
Mm.
specific result.
Yes.
And that's the issue with research these days, because there's so much funded research out there that's by companies that actually don't, that are sort of putting in money to skew if some of the information that's out there in this scientific sort of realm. But on a very simple level, when we have access to ionized water, when we're drinking ionized water, or drinking this molecular hydrogen rich drinking water, what's happening if you're drinking that every day? Most people know about oxidative stress these days.
Mm.
And if you're drinking ionized water, with a negative oxidation reduction potential, so if you look at those three words, oxidation reduction potential, so that means it's reversing or slowing, or helping to fight or combat that oxidation that takes place in our body due to oxidative stress, or due to, the buildup of acidity from food and our lifestyle, and maybe not sleeping, proper like 7 hours, 8 hours a night, or too much screen time, or just from working in an office job 5 days a week, 9 to 5, that's building up oxidative stress. Not exercising, a lot of these things that we don't realize are actually causing this, acidity or oxidation to actually take place in our bodies. And that's where we have these disease states come into our body, these sort of uh, issues from, like maybe cancer, or some sort of, colon issue or digestive issue, or, this person's got high cholesterol, or, or whatever it is. And obviously there's so many layers in terms of food and what you eat and how you live. But if you can drink, water that's living, and it's got some sort of structure to it, it's got a high oxidation reduction potential. So for example, one glass of the 9.5 is equivalent to eating 2 kilos of blueberries.
Whoa.
Yeah. In terms of
Wow.
antioxidants,
That's
you know?
wild.
Yeah. 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 And it's like, that's the sort of things that we're playing with here in terms of antioxidants. Or for everyone talks about green tea, here's another example. So everyone, if a cup of green tea has, maybe it's about a negative 200 on the oxidation reduction potential, 300. Um, and it's about, when you drink the water, it's 30 times stronger than that,
That's incredible.
than a cup of green tea.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
So when we get it fresh from the tap, it's usually coming out at about a negative 850, 900 on the oxidation reduction potential scale. So, and you can test that. You can get little readers that test the oxidation of different liquids and things. For example, tap water is a positive, 3 to 500. In the areas I've tested it, it's about 500 on the oxidation side. So that's up there with, soda, like Coke, those energy drinks and stuff that you can get. Even, the sugary sports drinks, things like that.
Yeah, like
That's
Gatorade or something like that.
Gatorade and things like that, So they're oxidizing your body, and they're not, tap water is up there with some of those things. And obviously that does depend on what's water you've got. And if you're filtering it on some level, then that's better than nothing,
Yeah.
at,
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Tap water freaks me out, man. I think I
Yeah.
stopped drinking tap water maybe like 10 years ago. I think I started listening to, you might be familiar, it's a guy named David Wolf. Do you know who that is? He's like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
nutritionist. He kind of got me
Yeah.
into it. But
Yeah.
occasionally I will go out to a restaurant or something and I'll get a
Mm.
water and I could just taste. I'm like, oh, I can barely even drink this. It's like my
It's like
taste is
pool
so
water.
sensitive now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but okay,
Definitely.
so like let's talk a little bit more about the structuring thing. And so is this related to like vortexing it? And maybe you could describe for people, is it like water's getting screwed up and then we're kind of getting it back to its like natural happy state or something along those lines? Or yeah, maybe
Mm.
describe a little bit more about that and how there's some certain processes or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I think a good place to start regarding that, I think if you look at any water source that hasn't gone through anything these days, so you just go and get a glass of water out of your tap, and then you freeze it. When you freeze it, what happens is that you can actually see what the sort of structure of that frozen water looks like if you put it in a clear glass jar. Now, if you go and take that same water source, you filter it, you put it through ionization and some sort of vortex on the exit, you will be mind blown at actually then what happens to the water when it freezes. Like, it represents when you put it under a microscope, what happens is that you see these perfect, like, snowflake, like, crystalline structures, right? So one of the main people that researched this was Dr. Masamoto's work. So he was like, it was all. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, was that the living water guy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He
okay.
did all the living water stuff. So the Japanese researcher. So he was heavily involved with actually the early stages of researching the machines we use, the ionizers that we use over in Japan.
Wow.
So but what he found and what he tested was basically he was testing more on a frequency level. So basically, either speaking positive or negative words into water, or labeling water jars with positive or negative words, and then freezing the water, and then putting that under a microscope, and then seeing what the structure, so the actual sort of like crystalline structure of what the water looked like.
Yeah, there's this woman now too. I wish I remembered her name right now. I came across her a few months ago. She's doing a similar thing though, but taking
Mm,
it to like another level.
yeah.
Man, I'm gonna have to remember her name and
Is she
kind of.
based in New Zealand?
I feel like she did have an accent. I'm trying to remember. I heard her on a podcast with a guy named he's got a podcast called Generation Z, and he's like really into
Yeah.
physics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he was kind of going back and forth with her about some of the
Yeah.
consistent images she was getting with things, and he was relating them to like his physics thoughts and everything
Yeah.
like that. It was really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Honestly, man, like we are all, anyone that's in the water space, like, I'm so stoked. Like, whatever they're doing, like, if it's on some level of research that's like moving into this sort of direction of like how does this water absorb in our bodies? Like whatever it is, like some of the new research that we're seeing in this space from specialists and just water enthusiasts, like I'm so grateful that it's not just like, one or two people. It's actually starting,
Yes.
within our, I suppose, within our company. So Anagic themselves, we have about 2 million people, users and distributors worldwide now.
Wow.
Now, it's a small number, but it's still 2 million people,
Yeah.
and so it's like 2% of like the world's population, 1 to 2%. And it's like, and this is why I talk about it too, because it's such a powerful time for people to be also realizing, you know, we can utilize this business model as well to help us move into more of a financial sort of freedom, sort of mindset, lifestyle, everything. And why I say that, have you heard of Paul Check? Do you know Paul Check at
Oh
all?
yeah, love that dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's over there with you guys, and
Yeah.
I've been following his work for a little while, and I just listened to. He just did a podcast like a day or two ago with it's Jason something. I forget his last name, but they were talking about abundance and the abundance archetype and things like that. But there was one thing that really stuck out to me in their conversation, and was he actually went in and looked up the word abundance and where that came from.
Mm.
And it was so interesting to me what he actually said and what it was. Now, if I remember correctly, one part he was talking about us was like it was underneath us, under it, like that abundance was like under,
Wow.
and then the sort of abundance, like that last part of that word, meant in some language water.
Wow.
And I was like, hang on a minute. And then he was like, but it's like underneath our feet is this abundance, and it's this, and it's the second part, or whatever that second part of that word meant in that language, had a relationship with water that was sort of going back to, some of our ancient sort of civilizations, right? Now, what was interesting to me when I thought about it, I was like, that makes so much sense, I suppose, in terms of when indigenous people talk about energy lines or ley lines,
Yes.
and then if you go into the sort of science of water divining and finding water and why and how things are so connected to water. And I've always spoken about it as when you tap into the world of water and water science, and just in general, like being of service in this way with what I do with water, what I feel is this next level of abundance that I've never felt in my life.
Wow.
And like, you know, it doesn't mean monetary. It just means on every level that I'm experiencing this level of abundance through accessing this sort of like water consciousness in a way.
Absolutely. It's when you
Yeah.
were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of I was watching this series maybe a few months ago or something that Graham Hancock had put out
Yeah.
about, different pyramid sites, and obviously there's so many different purposes of the pyramids, but among some of the purposes what he was describing was that a lot of them are associated with sacred springs. And
Mm-hmm.
when you would go down into them, you would find often a spring of some sort. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that is some kind of connective thing that just kind of lends credence to the whole like value of the reverence that a lot of these ancient cultures had for particular water sources at the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm. I really think I think that is really where there's been a bit of a missing link. Is this we've sort of skimmed over this sort of whole water topic within how they revered water as such a uh, precious resource in their culture, in their life, in their within the people, and how they used it. And now, if you do you know of Victor Schulberg's work?
Yeah, he's the vortex dude, right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
like the sort of one
he's
of the
the
OG.
water physics wizard from my
Yeah,
understanding.
that's it. That's it. The water wizard. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
I don't
Now,
know like his work super in detail, but I am familiar with him.
yeah. He like I'm just like tops to him for doing what he was doing at his time, like, early 1900s in Germany, and we're going into this realm of water and vortexing water and water physics before it was even a thing. Like no one was doing it. It was like he just sort of like observed nature and what was happening in nature through just watching water all day long. Now, it was interesting, like to see the evolution of his work because, what he was doing, when I was researching it and some of the things he was doing, what I found was that, in Germany, when they were harvesting, in the timber and the forestry realm, when they were harvesting wood in the forest, he was going out there and setting up these kind of like these canals and then using the tech, like the science of vortexing water and the way that water just naturally flows to move logs from like way up in the mountains down to the sawmill through canals.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
remember watching a video or something on that. It's
yeah,
fascinating. And he would do
it's
them
just
in like, he wouldn't do it in like a straight line either. He would do it kind of moving like how water would move as well, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah,
yeah,
that's fascinating.
yeah. And it's like that's the sort of stuff like his work. It's out there, but it's like also it's not used. That people aren't like because it's kind of like I understand why it's not used because now we have machines and things that can just go and pick up all these logs and do that. But it's like within nature, like if you go back to some of these ancient civilizations and why they revered water as such a precious resource is because I think they had that understanding that this precious resource can do so much for their lives. Not only is that it's at the center of life itself, but it's what also helps them to raise cattle, grow food, regenerate their soil, regenerate their health. And now, if you understand regenerative health and our bodies are, some people say 75% water. I think it's more like 95 to 99% water. Um, but, you know, if you understand that on a basic level, well, then if you put the right water in, well, your body is naturally then going to thrive and you're going to live a a long life of fueled by some of the best water in the world.
Yeah.
And we're still learning so much on what actually that looks like. But for me, I just sort of right now I'm looking at all the different ways that I can optimize water through ionization and then vortexing, structuring water.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and
So,
I feel
and
like I'm only just scratching the surface.
that's exciting. You got a lot to look forward to then.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I don't know, do you do some off-grid farming as well? And then do you incorporate I would assume you do incorporate that water within it. If so, and if so, what are some of your results? Like what have you noticed or what can you speak to in regards to maybe how it maybe could potentially help facilitate the
Mm.
growth of plants in a lot better and more healthy way?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I don't own any land myself, not yet. Not that I'll ever own land in my mind. I just sort of call it like
Yeah,
stewarding the
yeah.
land. But I've been in the sort of like that regenerative farming space, like I said at the start of the conversation. Um, yeah, but so what we've done, so it's been like a year and 4 or 5 months since we started the journey, and but when it comes to off-grid farming and regenerative farming, that's that path that I have been going down, I suppose, for the last 4 years. I started with permaculture, and most people know what permaculture is these days. And that's like where I really started. I was a young teenager when I discovered that. So I was like 15 when I discovered permaculture. Recently, so I got into syntropics or agroforestry. For people that who don't know what that is, it's basically where you're using a similar system to where you're just imitating how the rainforest works, through using tree rows and then different levels of light within the tree rows and planting out, food trees, and then you're growing a lot of your own mulch, which means you come in and then chop all of that mulch and then put that back in the soil. Now, so that's just like a little brief description on what I've been doing. But in terms of how we use the water through the industrial ionizers, so electrolyzed reduced water, which is another key sort of term that I use to describe this water, we can use different settings through the machines in the farming space. So whether you're doing permaculture or microgreens or mushrooms or hydroponics, or you're growing cannabis, or whatever your farming is, there's a way that this water can come into use. And this is why it's so amazing. This is why I actually got into utilizing these machines within not only for my own health, but also for business, and then also my life. But so we've got people coming and going.
Awesome.
And it's starting to rain as well, but I don't mind getting wet.
Oh, hey.
But it's good. As long as it's like you can see me okay with the camera.
Yeah,
but
I could see, I could hear you. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what lit me up when I started the business was finding out how we can use electrolyzed reduced water within this space. And what I discovered from there's a lot of guys over in California and America there, in some of the states that are actually growing cannabis, so not only for recreational but medicinally, that have gone from using chemicals or some sort of chemical, sort of conventional approach, to then getting one of these ionizers and then using these machines and that's it. No more chemicals.
That's awesome.
And I was like, hang on a second, what do you mean? And I started to ask the questions, and they were like, yeah, so they've gone in, they've installed the machine, and now they're using it for this, this, and this in terms of pest management, fungal disease management, mold. When the California fires happened, they were treating the plants with the water to treat the plants for smoke damage.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I interviewed a guy a while back. I think his name was Ryan Sprague. He's a really cool guy, and he's really like kind of innovating in the cannabis thing with like more like conscious cannabis production and all that. So I wonder if he's familiar with that. That's really cool.
Maybe, yeah. It has really, there's about 550 farms and grow houses that I know of over there that are utilizing the water.
That's so cool.
And now, instead of chemicals, instead of that conventional sort of approach. Now, I don't know how many of them are medicinal, and I think majority of them are recreational. So I don't know. I personally only have spoken to about 20 to 30 of them. And they're very, very like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to tell anyone about it. Like, they're very secretive.
And then it out there, revealing their
yeah, that's it. And when I looked at what was happening here in Australia, there was nothing. Wow. There wasn't one single person utilizing these machines or this water in Australia. Yeah, I know. And now we've got, because I've been on this journey now, we've got one commercial-based farmer. He's a sunflower farmer and a flower farmer. One of the biggest in this state where I am, Queensland, and he's now using electrolyzed reduced water to use within his sunflower production to increase the shelf life of the sunflowers.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
sunflowers are also amazing. I've seen some photos of some giant sunflowers, and I'm like, wow, I can't even believe how big some of those things get. I wanted to get your thoughts, because I talked to a woman a while back. We were talking about different things like regenerative farming and all this sort of stuff, and she's really doing great work trying to bring on people talking about ways that maybe we could solve just different problems. And we were talking about like dams, and I'm wondering like your thoughts on like where we're installing or we're building these dams and we're rerouting water systems. And in your opinion, because I know that there's some lakes out here, and most of the lakes out here in Arizona are like man-made, and they come through through the dam system and all that, and then they release one into the other and so on. And occasionally there's like these algae blooms, and you can't go in the lake for a certain amount of time until they fix it. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering with just your thoughts in general on like damming up water and your thoughts on that, and then maybe your thoughts on any solution. Like if you were to apply something like ionized water in some like mass production way within some of these water systems that may be contaminated or have some kind of toxic issues, do you feel like that
Mm.
might be a productive solution, or what are your thoughts on all that?
Mm. Mm. So like here in Australia, like we in rural properties, like we use dams a lot on properties, but in the sense of like we dig a huge hole in the ground and then it naturally fills up with water. Now
Okay.
some are spring fed, some are spring fed, which means they have a spring feeding into them, which keeps them full,
Hmm.
year in, year out, no matter if we're in drought. Because the three seasons that we have here in Australia is fire, flood, drought. It's just what is that's our country. Fire, flood, drought. They're the three extremities of our country here. And when it's in drought, dams are what usually save farmers' lives,
Okay.
in terms of their crop or their cattle or whatever. Whenever they need water, dams are one of the things
So
that
there's
they.
there's an effective and useful way to go about it.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And if you are using dams on any level, like, look, I'm not too sure, about going into like a natural flowing, water reservoir, like a
Hmm.
lake, or not a lake, a river or a stream, and then damming it up to use it for your own good, because downstream you don't know what's being affected.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel as if you can build a dam which is not in a natural stream on your property, and then it's spring fed, or it just fills up with rain, and then eventually when that dam seals, that dam is going to be full most of the time if you're getting regular rain.
Mm.
Now, it's a great thing to have because it means that you've got, the ability to also turn that area of that dam, into an oasis of habitat. So you've got
True.
animals, frogs, water dragons, you've got different native reeds and grasses, and you can build habitat around dams, which bring in really beneficial species to your land, which then also allows you to regenerate your land at a quicker pace too.
Mm.
So, because then naturally you've got a water source, but then you've got all these beautiful different animals and insects and species that are also able to come back, and if you start at one of the smallest things in the food chain, which is usually in the soil, and then you work your way up, and if you can basically tick the boxes for everything from what's in the soil to some of the biggest mammals that live on your land. So here in Australia, like we don't have um, you know, predator animals like that are really that big. Like we have wild dogs and pigs and stuff.
Kangaroos?
But kangaroos,
Yeah.
yeah, kangaroos, but they're not predator animals.
Oh
So,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we
That's
have,
fair.
mammals, right up to, yeah, kangaroo size here. But they sort of wreak a bit of havoc. They're a bit destructive in terms of land. And but if you're able to work with, yeah, small insects right up to, um, just your basic animals within your land. If you're raising goats or cattle or something like that, it's important to have these animals within the system because it adds to the whole system. And when I say system, I'm talking about an ecosystem. And you're
Yeah.
talking about everything that happens within an ecosystem. And in a syntropic view or an agroforestry view, well, that's what you're working towards. You're working towards rebuilding the rainforest.
Okay, so then maybe just in regards to your case and like some of your experience or what you're aware of, I don't know if you've ever
Mm-hmm.
encountered any kind of situation because maybe you guys do it in a really great way. And I don't really know exactly why it's happening in certain areas out here, but there will be instances where like the fish will be like floating up or something because they're dying, and I don't really know what's causing it exactly, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something unhealthy. And I wonder, in your opinion, like if you have any ideas on how you would go about maybe trying to do that, maybe
Yeah.
even on a micro scale or something, and then
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah,
some
because
ideas.
that was the second part of your question, which was like regarding using ionized water or something along that terms for algae blooms and balancing out the systems of natural waterways. Now, talking to environmental scientists over the years that I know here in Australia, like the issue comes a lot from what I've seen from just the disruption, like the disturbing sort of ecosystem that happens. So, say if you go into a river or a spring or a dam, and then you put it out of balance. So you pull something out, or you put something in, like a
Mhm.
glyphosate chemical,
Mm,
or a chemical spill, or you pull out all the mangroves. You're disrupting the whole system. So then what happens is maybe for the fish, for example, if they're dying within a river and there hasn't been a chemical spill, but maybe there's been all these trees which are upstream that have been taken out along the banks, well,
mhm,
then all of a sudden, maybe the river isn't actually getting the oxygen it needs
mm.
because there might have been an overgrowth of bacteria, which has caused an algae bloom, and then basically it's then the water's not oxygenating enough, or if that flow starts to slow down and you're not getting that flow because maybe there's some sort of rubbish or debris blocking it, you start to see a lot of issues. So every single case is isolated and different from what I've experienced.
Yeah.
And look, in terms of ionization and how you can treat certain things, I think in certain ways we could use maybe the 2.5 from the machines. So for people that don't know what I'm referring to, it's the 2.5 pH, and that's when we produce that through our machines. What's coming out is kind of like hypochlorous acid. So it's very, very strong acidic water, but it's not a chemical base. So it's not toxic. So it means you
Did
can
you
get it on your skin.
did you say, sorry, it sounded like kind of like hydrochloric acid, but I don't think that's what you said. Did you say
Hy-
hy
hypochlorous acid.
hyperchloric? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'm actually
Hypo,
not familiar with that.
yeah, hypochlorous acid. So you can go and buy that. They
Mhm.
sell it mostly as a disinfectant
Okay.
in that realm. It's very similar to chlorine bleach
Okay.
because it's producing, when we produce it through our ionizers, it's kind of like you've got a free chlorine molecule floating around. Um, and that's where that sodium chloride, which is the sodium, comes in.
Mm.
Um, so when we produce it, we get this strong acidic water. And we've got a study from ATS Labs over in the States. So there was a couple of cannabis guys that studied this on five, you know, like foodborne pathogens like E. coli and Salmonella and a couple other pathogens. And what they tested it against chlorine bleach, and then they tested straight from the machine the 2.5. And what they found was the 2.5 was able to kill any of these foodborne pathogens within 30 seconds of contact with that pathogen.
Wow.
Now, versus the chlorine bleach, when they tested it versus the chlorine bleach took about 30 minutes for it to kill the pathogens that were present. And something to take note of is that the effective level of the 2.5 was 99.99%.
Mm.
So that means it was pretty much 100%
That's
every
wild.
time it was going to kill those pathogens or those viruses or anything that it
Yeah.
comes into contact with. But you can still get it on your skin. You can get it in your eyes. You can get it in your mouth, and it's safe.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. I was gonna say because
Yeah.
I'm assuming there'd be some good bacteria on us because we don't want to sterilize ourselves. That's kind of one of
No.
my thoughts about like things like hand sanitizers is that
Yeah.
I get the idea behind it, but I think it's a little too much constant,
Mhm.
just too over sterile in my opinion. Like things like that are constantly killing the bacterias that you want. And so
Mhm.
yeah, I was curious about that.
Yeah.
Um man, what else? I had something else I was gonna ask you and I forgot what it was. Oh, what are your thoughts? Okay, what are your thoughts on like carbon filtration? And because I'm aware I've heard even for your own body you could consume things like activated carbon, or what if you had a like some kind of system, giant carbon blocks that you put in, ran your water through, like if there was a dam or some big water source that was running from one lake into another, and you just had these giant blocks of carbon or something, and you're running your water through it, like
Mm.
uh or just carbon filtration in general. Is it
Mm.
a pretty good thing? Is it okay? Is it How does it compare to things like you're talking about? What do you think about carbon filtration?
Yeah. Well, I think first off to mention is like the filters that are in our machines, they use a carbon block technology.
Oh, okay.
So they use it's activated, activated,
Mm,
not charcoal. I think they just call it activated carbon. And it has I can't remember off the top of my head the micron size, but it's very, very small.
mm,
And then it's got like a mechanical filter in it as well. But carbon, block technology, or activated like charcoal filters or charcoal filters just in general, that sort of stuff. I'm all for it because it's antibacterial. It does pull out a lot of the stuff. It's antiviral as well. That's why you can go and get activated charcoal, and you can take that internally. I do it, periodically here and there when I feel like I need to. Say if I just did a 2 month parasite and fungal cleanse.
oh, cool.
And
What did you do for that? Was that part of your protocol?
yeah, so charcoal was in a supplement that I was taking.
Mm,
So I did 2 months. So the first month, the second week of both months, there was a supplement that I was taking, and it had activated charcoal in it.
mm,
And it's a binder within our body, so it basically goes in, and then any viral things that are going on, any parasites that are there, any fungal things that are present, it's going to kind of bind that up. And then alongside the other ingredients that were in that supplement, it basically all binds together, and then you pass that out. But it's basically the whole protocol for me was focusing on parasites and any fungal issues that were going on, taking these supplements, and then being able to pass them out. And then just mostly it was restricting what I was putting in. So being very selective and restrictive with the foods I was eating. So it was all kind of like, above ground vegetables and,
yeah.
pretty predominantly an animal based diet. So, not having fruits apart from green apples, things like that. But going back to the charcoal question quickly, just regarding dams and rivers, there's probably a way where I was even thinking about it before when you were talking about it. There's probably a way that you could use, you know, either electrolysis technology or hydrolysis technology, which is different, or some sort of active charcoal or charcoal carbon block technology on a mass scale to do something like that. Now, the system that you would have to install and what that actually looks like, I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I know for a fact, if you have a dam and you want to utilize the dam water in a hydroponic system that you have set up, or some sort of system where you're utilizing the water, you can pump the water from the dam through a carbon block pre-filter and then have it go through a water ionizer, and that's no problem
Mm,
as long as like the pre-filter you've got before it goes through the machine, it maybe has some sort of sediment filter, bacteria filter also a part of it, then it can go through the machine, and then you can utilize ionized water from the dam source. So carbon block charcoal filtration is pretty much what they've been using for water filtration for forever. It's
interesting.
just
Okay.
got it's just kind of the carbon block technology is relatively new, from what I've looked at, and I believe there's a company called MultiPure which is based over in the States. I'm trying to work with them to get them here in Australia,
Oh, cool.
um, but I believe they invented the carbon block technology.
Hmm.
I believe it was MultiPure themselves that actually invented carbon block technology.
Wow.
I
Kudos.
don't quote me on that, but I believe it was them.
Wow. Well, shout out to them for doing that. Good work.
Yeah, yeah,
I wonder
yeah.
if lava rocks have, I think that lava rocks contain a certain amount of carbon. I'm not positive on that, but maybe that could be some potential or something. But when you were describing your what you were doing to kind of detox yourself, that was
Mm.
interesting. And I had a friend that I had interviewed before. He was describing it to me. I think it was using a particular, maybe like an Aztec or I think actually a couple of, like an Italian clay or something like that. He was doing like a
Yeah,
clay
that,
detox, which is pretty. It can be pretty hardcore, I guess, sometimes.
yeah.
But he was describing it to me like what it's doing because you were talking about how it kind of chelates out like the toxins or whatever, and he was saying
Mhm.
how the toxins or whatever the things are, they're like puzzle pieces that lock in and bind with, say, like in your instance, like the carbon or the clay, and then it kind
Mm.
of just like locks together and then like, well, I don't know, comes out of you or something. But it was
Yeah,
just interesting how he was describing it because it's like it was made to pick that stuff up and get it out.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's crazy is that if you go out into nature and you spend enough time out in nature, and if you just spend time observing certain animals, that try and pick a location where there's some natural clay deposits around.
Hmm.
But if you go and spend time near a river or a water source that has a natural clay deposit, and you just watch animals for a longer period enough time, you're going to see. It's really fascinating. You'll see an animal come to the clay source, dig up the clay, and then eat some of the clay.
Mm.
Now, and this is where medical grade clays and food grade clays and all these things came into. I think they sort of observed this and they were like, "What's going on?" And then they started to test it within ourselves. And I think our ancestors sort of had this understanding as well because of this observation that took place within nature. And I believe in certain indigenous cultures, they used to consume clays regularly in their diet. Now, from the research I've done into this, clays are an essential important not only for the minerals, but in our skin and just what's everything that's coming from the clay, because it's that earth element. It's a part of the earth. It's grounding us, reconnecting us on all those sort of esoteric levels. But then you've also got this binder that you can take into intuitively. You can just feel into when you need it. Go and get a bentonite clay or a green
Mm.
Italian clay or a zeolite. And now the difference, I take two types of clay. I take bentonite green, activated clay, like this bentonite. It's a kind of like a green color, and then I take a zeolite clay. Now, I look at zeolite as like a micro binder, and then I
Hmm.
look at bentonite clay as a macro binder. And I take about
Mm.
50-50, a teaspoon, 50-50 of both clays just every now and again. Some weeks it's every 2 to 3 days I take it.
And when you take it, do you take it with water or
Yeah.
how is that? How does that go? Yeah.
So big glass of water. Make sure when you're doing it, you're taking you're drinking heaps of water as well, because the clay, ideally you would actually want to soak the clay the night before, but sometimes I just don't have time. Well, not time, I just forget sometimes and I just don't
Yeah.
do it. But what I've found through using clay and ionized water, the results that I get by combining the two have actually been kind of mind blowing.
Wow.
Now, because what I take clay for personally is like, and I'm not recommending everybody to go out and just do this, but it's good to just do a bit of reading into why it's good to have some dietary clays. But what I've observed and what happened in nature is they go and bind themselves up because they might know they have a parasite or something happening within their body. And the clays are sort of bind up the toxins and the parasites, and then you actually just pass that out. Now, I'm not taking enough to block me up, and then basically have this huge amount of clay come out, but I'm taking enough
Yeah.
to assist in that process of acting as a binder within my body as a regular sort of supplement, and doing it more from the approach of a holistic preventative medicine approach versus a
Yeah.
disease and reaction approach.
That seems like the way to go. And that's probably
Yeah.
what I would assume that a lot of our ancestors used to do as well, if I was to guess. It's
Yeah.
funny because I remember like when I was little, the things that we do when we're kids, but I would dig like a hole and just fill it with water and I just kind of like chill in muddy water. I don't know why. It just
Yeah,
felt like a fun, natural thing to do. But maybe
yeah,
there's
yeah,
something to that on like a primitive level or something along those lines. But
yeah,
are there any
absolutely.
other like interesting sort of like natural health related practices that you do that you feel are pretty substantial or that you've felt like you've kind of gained a pretty great benefit from?
Mm, mm. I mean, I over the years there's been so many, and it's hard to really go like this is something that really works every
Yeah.
single day. Now, a lot of my passion has come from, you know, Ayurveda, which is sort of like coming out of India,
Mm.
and Chinese medicine. And I know, and what drew me to you actually was seeing some of the alchemy guys that you get on the podcast. And alchemy was actually a school of thinking, and this deep practice, which I think has been embedded in my DNA for lifetimes. And that alchemy, herbal alchemy especially, and herbs, and the practice of any herbalism and any level for me has been, I feel like ever since I was a little kid, has been a part of my life.
Wow.
So alongside water, when I went on that journey, that's that whole journey that we've sort of just spoken about. Um, that was something that really I've been even going down that water wellness path because I was drinking spring water for maybe 3 years prior to getting onto ionized water. But herbalism or herbs just in general and this holistic lifestyle has been really ingrained in me since I was a little boy. Now, what really got me passionate about herbs was, like I said, alchemy and then tonic herbalism from the Taoism,
Mm.
that Chinese medicine school of thought. And so, I'm talking about chaga and cordyceps and lion's mane and, those
Rishi.
sort of
Yeah.
reishi and, astragalus and some of these herbs. And I take herbs every single day, no matter what. The non-negotiable for me is astragalus. I take astragalus every day.
That's one that I've had on my list for so long and I haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's like I've
Yeah.
heard so many great things about it. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I was
Oh
gonna ask
man.
you that. I was gonna say like, are there any particular herbs that you gravitate towards?
Yeah. Right now we're moving into so we're in autumn right now. So it's the metal element in the five element system. Also the lungs and the large intestines. That's the two organs that are related to this season. But then we're moving into the winter, which is the water element and related to the kidneys and the urinary bladder.
Mm.
So some of my background, I suppose, which I haven't spoken about, is body work. So I did a 9 month like Zentai Shiatsu bodywork therapy course in 2021.
Can you
And that
describe a little bit about what that is exactly?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a practice which was created by Gwyn Williams. He's the founder. He created about 22 years ago. And he started with basically just combining Thai massage and Zen Shiatsu.
Okay, what is
And
Zen Shiatsu? I have not heard of that, but
okay.
sounds really cool.
So Zen Shiatsu is the practice. It's a bodywork practice where they use channels, or
Mhm.
most people know them as meridians in our body.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And
Is it kind of like Reiki, sort of? Or
kind of, but they use acupressure points. So act like
Mm.
acupuncture points. They use acupressure. So touch, where they're basically working with certain points on the body in Zen Shiatsu, and then holding the points for long periods of time. So sometimes the sessions are 3 to 4 hours long.
Wow.
Very, very slow, very long sessions, but the results, if it's practiced in the right way, the results are mind blowing. It's quite a gentle practice, and it works a lot for very elderly people that can't really move around too much. So you're more working on the energetic body, but also the organ system, the channels and the sort of the meridians within the system. Thai massage, most people know of Thai massage. And there's a lot of different approaches to Thai massage. And then what Gwyn's done is he basically combined, sorry, the Thai massage, the Zen Shiatsu. He used, if you know of osteopathy, he combined it a little bit of that sort of practice as well, alongside the Chinese five element system and then Ayurveda. So he sort of brought a lot of this different schools of thought and bring it into one course.
Wow.
So I spent 9 months studying that to become a therapist, and then for about six to 8 months after that, I was treating in a clinic and taking clients and you know doing the body work. And I had the water. The water had already been in a part of my life, and I was getting people in the water, and the results that we were getting with people were crazy. Structural energetics, in terms of posture and muscle tissue and fascia, and working on all the different levels from emotional body to the physical body. Was such an amazing insight at such a young age to watch people and how they respond to different changes, and it can just be the smallest change as
Yeah.
well. So,
Okay.
so sometimes, oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry. It's really really interesting listening to you talk because, think you said you're 23, is that right?
Yeah,
And
23.
just all of this experience that you're talking about, it's so fascinating. I'm curious, like, what were you like as a kid? Like, what was your kind of like upbringing? Were your parents kind of into these sort of things too, or like, how did you grow up? And I would assume there was something along the line that kind of like kept you or got
Yeah,
you on this sort of thing. So I'm just curious about that.
yeah, definitely. It was. I feel like my mum wasn't ever into that. Well, it wasn't really ever come from my parents. It was more I was influenced through, my uncle, because he
Mm.
studied in India, and my uncle was one of my biggest influences in the holistic sort of medicine world. Because he was always doing the Ayurvedic stuff and the steam herbal massages and working out of a clinic. And I used to go to the clinic and spend time there, and I was just surrounded by that, but I didn't know that it was actually being ingrained in me, and
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was drawing me to a path of holistic medicine and an alternative living. And then my great grandpa, he's a farmer. Now
Nice.
he was sort of my great grandparents were some of my other influences in my grandparents, and not so much my mum and dad, but that's sort of how I grew up. I grew up around a family who preached and practiced holistic medicine, and but just in their own way through healthy eating and lifestyle. And my uncle being in that realm of holistic medicine and alternative living, like it was just great. My great grandpa being the farmer and getting that connection to the soil, and growing up fishing. So I was very practical, very outdoorsy, and I kind of had to you know raise myself through. Oh no!
I can hear you. There you
Oh,
go.
you got me. Sorry.
I can hear you.
Sorry.
You popped off of the image, but I can still hear you.
Oh, you got me.
Oh,
Sorry.
there you
On my
are.
phone.
Cool.
Yeah, I think my phone is like on 5%.
Oh, is it?
So
Okay. We could
yeah,
make it quick. We could wrap it
but
up.
yeah. That's okay. I just didn't expect my phone to die. Like I didn't know it was like on such a small percentage. But
I didn't even think about
yeah,
that,
so
but yeah.
yeah, you're right. But yeah, so essentially like that was for me, that was such a big influence in my life, was being raised by these people, and just being surrounded by these people. And it was really what has shaped me into the person I am today.
Wow. That's
And
awesome.
yeah, it's great.
Well,
But
okay.
yeah, so
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah, but no, it's just, all of this stuff, it's just, I love sharing this stuff, and it's great to get that out there, because, ionized water, regenerative farming, the next 7 generations, this stuff is what is important to me. And by talking about it, we're getting more people thinking about it, which then starts to plant more seeds in people's minds. So, but yeah, I
100%.
think we might have to wrap it up, brother.
For
We can
sure.
even we can even jump back on for another chat. I'm so open to it, man.
Yeah, I would
I want to
love.
I want to hear about you. I've not actually spent time listening to you yet either.
Yeah. No, let's do another one at some point. I'd love to. This was a really
Yeah,
amazing and important conversation. It's something as simple as water, but it's the thing that we all basically live off of and we're made out of. And Yeah, I mean, it's important, and what you're doing is so important.
Yeah.
Where would you direct any of the people listening that might be interested? Any links or any, maybe yourself, your Instagram, any websites, anything in
Mhm.
general? Where would you point people?
Yeah, so you can find me at AJ underscore Olsen1. That's my personal Instagram. And then RWR underscore restructured water regeneration on Instagram as well. So that's my business page. But yeah, my phone's about to finish up. So, but that's the main two places people can find me. So I've got my main page and my business page.
All right, AJ Olson, you're the man. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you so much for doing this and taking the time.
No, no worries, brother. Appreciate your time as well. And I hope you have a beautiful night over there.
You too.